Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Nick Russell woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the Manhattan skyline beyond. 6 weeks until the wedding. 6 weeks until he'd marry Vanessa Palmer, the woman who'd captivated him from the moment she'd spilled champagne on his custom suit at the gallery opening 2 years ago. "Sorry about the interruption, Mr. Russell," she'd said, not sounding sorry at all. "But your expression was too serious for someone surrounded by so much beauty." Nick smiled at the memory as he checked his phone. A text from his grandfather, Harold Russell, the man who'd built Russell Technologies from a garage startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Breakfast at Harlow's. 9 a.m. Important matters to discuss. Harold rarely requested meetings without an agenda attached. Nick showered quickly, dressed in a charcoal suit, and headed downtown. Harold Russell sat ramrod straight despite his 82 years, his silver hair impeccably styled, reading the Wall Street Journal with a cup of black coffee. "Nicholas," he said, folding the paper as Nick approached. "Prompt as always. What's so important it couldn't wait until Sunday dinner?" Nick asked, settling across from him. Harold's weathered hands placed a leather portfolio on the table. "I'm finalizing the transfer of controlling interest in Russell Technologies to you. Upon your marriage to Vanessa, you'll become CEO and majority shareholder." Nick's breath caught. "I thought you weren't stepping down for another 5 years." "Cancer doesn't care about 5-year plans," Harold said matter-of-factly. "Pancreatic. Terminal. About maybe 6 months." Nick felt the world tilt. Harold had raised him after his parents died in a plane crash when he was 12. The man had been father, mother, mentor, all rolled into one. "Does anyone else know?" "Just my doctors and now you." Harold's eyes, still sharp, studied Nick. "Your inheritance will be substantial. Nearly $3 billion in company shares, plus the family properties and investments. I've worked too hard to see it squandered or stolen." "What are you implying?" Harold shrugged. "Simply that sudden wealth attracts opportunists. You're marrying in 6 weeks. Are you certain Vanessa loves you and not what you represent?" "She doesn't even know about this inheritance," Nick said defensively. "We've never discussed the specifics of your estate plan." "Perhaps," Harold conceded, "but money has a way of revealing true character. Just be vigilant." That evening, Nick met Vanessa at Perla, her favorite restaurant. She was radiant in a red dress that accentuated her curves, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder. As always, heads turned when she entered a room. "Wedding planner called," she said after ordering a martini. "The Waldorf Ballroom is confirmed for the reception. 300 guests, just as we planned." Nick nodded, studying her. 29, 7 years his junior, with a background in art history and a job at a prestigious gallery. They'd met when Nick was looking for pieces for the Russell Technologies headquarters. "My grandfather's stepping down," he said suddenly. "I'm taking over as CEO after the wedding." Vanessa's expression was perfect surprise. "That's incredible, babe. I knew he'd choose you eventually, but so soon? We should celebrate." Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. Nick pushed away his grandfather's warnings as the bitter thoughts of a dying man. Across town, in a dimly lit apartment in Brooklyn, Leo Hayward stretched his muscular frame on rumpled sheets, watching Vanessa dress. "You're late," he said, his voice a lazy drawl. "Loverboy will suspect." Vanessa snorted. "Nick suspects nothing. He trusts me completely." She checked her makeup in the mirror. "Besides, he just told me he's becoming CEO after the wedding." Harold stepping down. Leo sat up, suddenly alert. "Does that mean what I think it means?" "Yes," Vanessa said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "The inheritance is being transferred sooner than we thought." "Billions, Leo. Not millions. Billions." Leo whistled. "And he has no prenup plans?" "He's mentioned it, but I've been working on him, making him feel like suggesting one would insult my love." She kissed Leo deeply. 6 more weeks of pretending, then we'll be set for life. "Just make sure you keep playing your role," Leo warned. "Don't get sloppy now." What neither knew was that in his Chelsea apartment, Nick couldn't sleep. Harold's warnings echoed in his mind. On impulse, he opened his laptop and typed a message to Curtis Dawson, a private investigator he'd used to vet potential business partners in the past. Need discreet surveillance. Personal matter. We'll explain in person. 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations and business transitions. Nick divided his time between Harold's office, learning the intricacies of running Russell Technologies, and appeasing Vanessa's increasingly elaborate wedding demands. The flowers from Milan will cost an extra $30,000, she mentioned casually over dinner. Whatever makes you happy, Nick replied mechanically, his mind elsewhere. Curtis Dawson's preliminary report had been frustratingly mundane. Vanessa's routine appeared normal. Gallery work, lunch with friends, yoga classes, wedding appointments. Nothing suspicious. Until today. Curtis had called that morning. She's deviating from her pattern, he'd said, taking calls in stairwells, looking over her shoulder. And yesterday, she took a cab to Brooklyn, to an address not in her contact list. Stayed for 3 hours. The address belonged to a Leonardo Hayward, 34, former investment banker with 3 restraining orders from wealthy ex-girlfriends. Nick leaned back in his office chair, staring at the ceiling. He needed more information before confronting her. Following a hunch, he called Diana Winters, the Russell family attorney. Diana, I need a favor. Can you prepare a marriage contract that appears to waive all my rights to family assets? Make it look legitimate, but ensure it wouldn't hold up in court. Nick, that's highly irregular. It's a test, Diana. One I hope fails. That evening, he presented the fake document to Vanessa. My grandfather insists, he explained apologetically. Says it's standard for the family, though I disagree. Vanessa's face showed momentary shock before smoothing into understanding. Of course, if it's important to Harold. She skimmed the document. But this seems to say you're waiving rights to family assets, not me. Nick feigned embarrassment. Harold's old-fashioned. He believes the man should demonstrate trust first. You watch her closely. I can have it rewritten if you prefer something more conventional. No, Vanessa said quickly, then softened her tone. No, that's fine. Your family, your traditions. She signed without further questions. That night, she slipped out claiming a wedding emergency meeting. Nick had Curtis follow her. She went straight to Leo Hayward's apartment. The next morning, Nick made his move. He told Vanessa he needed to travel to Boston for business. The moment she left for work, he called a locksmith and had the locks changed on their apartment. Then he hired a tech specialist to sweep for hidden recording devices and install his own. When a specialist found Vanessa's carefully hidden second phone in a hollowed-out art book, Nick felt his world crack. He waited until the technician left before examining it. The password took trying several combinations before he guessed correctly. Leo Love. The text between Vanessa and Leo spanned months, detailing their affair and their plans. V. He's such a fool. Thinks I'm madly in love with him. L. How much longer do we have to wait? V. The wedding is perfect cover. He'll never suspect we're stealing his inheritance. I've got him wrapped around my finger. L. And the prenup? V. Already handled. The idiot had me sign one that protects me, not him. Once we're married, I'll file for divorce within months. We'll be set for life. Nick's hands shook as he downloaded and backed up every message, every photo. Evidence of their treachery preserved in multiple locations. Then he called Curtis Dawson again. I need everything on Leonardo Hayward. Everything. And I mean the dirt that wouldn't make it into an official report. Curtis was silent for a moment. That'll be expensive. Money is no object. Nick replied coldly. I need leverage, and I need it fast. That night, he lay awake beside Vanessa, listening to her breathe, wondering how he'd ever believe the lies. His phone buzzed with a text from Curtis. Found something. Hayward's involved with loan sharks. Owes big money to dangerous people. Meet tomorrow. Nick stared at the ceiling, the beginnings of a plan forming in his mind. Not just exposure, not just humiliation, something that would utterly destroy them both. The day before the wedding, Nick maintained his mask perfectly. He smiled through the rehearsal dinner, toasted to their future, and kissed Vanessa tenderly before sending her off with her bridesmaids for the traditional night apart. "See you at the altar," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I'll be the one in the tuxedo," he replied with a practiced smile. Once alone, he met Curtis Dawson in an unmarked car 3 blocks from the hotel. "Everything in place?" Nick asked. Curtis nodded. Audio setup throughout the ballroom, connected to the main speaker system. The footage is edited to include just the key conversations, and the information on Hayward's debts is ready for distribution to his business associates should you give the word. And Meredith Torres, Leo's ex, she'll be there. Front row, just as arranged. She's quite eager to see him crash and burn. Nick nodded, a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. And the final piece? Curtis handed him a small box. GPS trackers for both their phones, activated remotely. Once you press this button, we'll know their every move for the next 6 months, whether they have their phones or not. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow will be eventful. The morning of his wedding dawned bright and clear. Nick dressed methodically in his custom tuxedo, rehearsing his plans. Tyler Hopkins, his best man and oldest friend, watched with concern. "You've barely said 10 words this morning," Tyler observed. "Wedding jitters?" Nick's smile was cold. "Not at all. Just focused on making today memorable." The Waldorf's grand ballroom was transformed into a garden of white roses and crystal, just as Vanessa had specified. 300 guests filled the seats, business associates, society friends, Vanessa's large extended family. Nick stood at the altar, scanning the crowd. Leo Hayward sat on the bride's side, playing his role as Vanessa's colleague. Meredith Torres, as arranged, sat prominently on the groom's side. The music swelled. The doors opened. Vanessa appeared in a custom Vera Wang creation that had cost more than most people's homes. She was breathtaking, her smile triumphant as she processed down the aisle. Nick smiled back, but as she reached him, he stepped away from the altar toward the microphone stand that had been positioned for their vows. "Before we proceed," he said clearly, his voice carrying through the room, "I'd like to share something with all of you." Confusion flickered across Vanessa's face. The minister looked uncertain. "My fiancé has a beautiful voice," Nick continued smoothly. "I thought you should all hear it." He pressed a button on his phone. The ballroom speakers crackled to life. Vanessa's voice filled the room. "The wedding is perfect cover. He'll never suspect we're stealing his inheritance. Once we're married, I'll file for divorce within months. We'll be set for life." Leo's voice followed. "And he has no idea about us?" Vanessa again, "None. He's completely clueless. Just a few more weeks of pretending to love him." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face drained of color. "Nick," she whispered, reaching for him. "I can explain." "No need," he replied, his voice hard. "Leo, why don't you come up and join your real girlfriend?" Security guards were already moving toward Leo, who was attempting to slip out a side door. They escorted him to the front, where he stood awkwardly beside a shell-shocked Vanessa. "I'd like to thank you all for coming," Nick addressed the stunned crowd. "Unfortunately, there will be no wedding today, just the exposure of a con artist and her partner." He turned to Vanessa's family. "Mr. and Mrs. Palmer, I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter has been having an affair throughout our engagement, while plotting to steal my family's assets." Vanessa's mother collapsed into her husband's arms. Her father's face contorted with rage, not at Nick, but at her. "You disgust me," he spat at his daughter. "You're no longer welcome in our home. Consider yourself disowned." One by one, Vanessa's family members stood and walked out, leaving her standing alone with Leo, surrounded by murmuring guests and flashing cameras from society photographers. "Security will show you out," Nick said coldly. "Your belongings have been packed and sent to Mr. Hayward's apartment. The locks to our home have been changed." As they were escorted out, Vanessa's mascara streaming down her face, she turned back. "You'll regret this, Nick. We'll destroy you for this humiliation." Nick simply smiled. "I look forward to your attempt." As the ballroom emptied, Tyler approached Nick. "That was the coldest thing I've ever seen. Justified, but cold." "That wasn't revenge," Nick replied quietly. "That was just the beginning." The story of the Russell Palmer wedding disaster exploded across social media and tabloids. Billionaire heir exposes gold-digging fiancé at altar screamed the headlines. Video clips of the confrontation, somehow leaked to the press, went viral within hours. Nick retreated to the Russell family estate in the Hamptons, where Harold waited for news. "So it's done," the old man said when Nick arrived. His illness had progressed rapidly. He was gaunt now, moving with the aid of a walker. "The wedding is canceled," Nick confirmed, pouring himself a scotch. "But they've already threatened retaliation." Harold's thin lips curled into a smile. "Let them try. Russells don't just defend. We annihilate threats." "I learned from the best," Nick acknowledged, raising his glass in salute. Meanwhile, in Leo's cramped Brooklyn apartment, Vanessa paced furiously. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications. Messages from so-called friends expressing false sympathy while reveling in her downfall. Wedding vendors demanding payment for canceled services. Reporters seeking exclusive interviews. "He destroyed my life," she shrieked, hurling her phone against the wall. "My family won't even speak to me. My career is over. The gallery fired me this morning." Leo seemed oddly calm, nursing a whiskey on his worn leather couch. "He played us. I underestimated him." "We need to fight back," Vanessa insisted. "I spent 2 years of my life on this con. I'm not walking away with nothing." Leo's phone rang, an unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Hayward," a gravelly voice said. "About that money you owe Grayson. Payment deadline has moved up. 3 days, or we start taking collateral. Fingers first, then toes." The call disconnected. Leo's face had gone ashen. "What is it?" Vanessa demanded. "The loan sharks," Leo whispered. "Somehow they know where I am. The deadline was supposed to be 2 months from now. How much do you owe?" 300,000. Vanessa collapsed onto the couch. "And we have maybe 20,000 between us." The doorbell rang. Both froze. Then Leo cautiously approached the door and checked the peephole. "It's a delivery guy," he said, opening the door. The courier handed over a large manila envelope and departed. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "I've acquired your debt from Grayson. Consider it an investment in our continuing relationship. The clock is ticking." "In our son of a bitch," Leo breathed. "He bought my debt. He owns me now." Vanessa snatched the paper. "He's toying with us, making us sweat." "No, he's hunting us," Leo corrected, a new respect in his voice. The public humiliation was just the opening move. The next morning, Nick sat in the offices of Russell Technologies, reviewing security protocols with Diana Winters and the head of corporate security. "They'll target the company," Nick predicted. "It's where they think I'm most vulnerable." "We've increased cybersecurity," Diana assured him. "And we're monitoring all accounts for unusual activity." Nick nodded. "Good. Now, about the counteroffensive." His assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Sir, there's been a break-in at your Manhattan apartment." Security footage revealed Leo Hayward forcing entry, then methodically photographing documents in Nick's home office. "Don't alert the police," Nick instructed, a smile playing at his lips. "Let's see what bait he takes." The documents were elaborate fakes, falsified accounts showing vulnerable offshore investments, fake passwords to non-existent cryptocurrency wallets, and a manufactured scandal involving Russell Technologies and insider trading. Within days, anonymous tips led SEC investigators to examine Russell Technologies' trading practices, exactly as Nick had anticipated. They took the insider trading bait, Diana reported, looking impressed despite herself. "But we're fully prepared for the investigation." "And the offshore accounts?" "Mr. Hayward attempted to access them using the passwords from your documents. Instead of finding money to steal, he triggered our trap. His devices are now compromised. We're monitoring everything, emails, texts, calls." Nick leaned back, satisfied. "Perfect. And Vanessa? She's been approaching your former business associates, offering dirt on you in exchange for financial support. No takers so far. She'll get desperate soon." Nick checked his watch. Time for the next phase. That evening, Meredith Torres, Leo's vengeful ex, accidentally encountered Vanessa at a bar. "You poor thing," Meredith said with practiced sympathy. "Leo did the same to me, you know." used me for my family's connections, then discarded me. Vanessa, several martinis in and starved for any friendly face, latched onto the conversation. Nick, Russell destroyed my life. Men like that are untouchable, Meredith agreed, signaling for more drinks. But Leo has vulnerabilities. Did he ever tell you about Atlantic City? By the end of the night, Vanessa had learned about Leo's gambling addiction, his habit of dating multiple women simultaneously, and, most importantly, his past involvement with identity theft schemes. Information she stored away, unaware she was being manipulated exactly as Nick had planned. 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, Nick sat beside Harold's hospital bed. The old man's condition had deteriorated rapidly, his once powerful frame now skeletal beneath the sheets. "Don't waste time here with me," Harold rasped. "Finish what you started." Nick shook his head. "Family first. Always." Harold's withered hand gripped Nick's with surprising strength. "I need to know you'll be all right, that the company will be secure." "I've got everything under control," Nick assured him. A knock at the door interrupted them. Diana Winters entered, her expression grave. "They've made their move," she said without preamble. "Vanessa is giving an exclusive interview to Vanity Fair, and Leo has filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against his former employer, claiming he was fired due to pressure from Russell Technologies. Both distractions, Nick assessed. What's their real play? Diana hesitated. There's been an attempt to access Harold's personal medical records, and someone tried to bribe one of the nurses for information about his condition. Harold's laugh was a dry rattle. They're looking for my will, hoping there's still a way to get their hands on the Russell fortune. I'll increase security, Nick said, already texting instructions. And there's something else, Diana added. Vanessa's been seen meeting with Maxwell Whitfield. Nick's expression darkened. Maxwell Whitfield was Russell Technologies' main competitor and Harold's longtime business rival, a ruthless corporate raider who'd tried to acquire the company multiple times. So they're selling company secrets, Nick concluded, or trying to. Without access to real information, they're limited in what they can offer, Diana pointed out. But Whitfield doesn't know that, Nick mused. He might see this as an opportunity to damage us before he knows he's been fed false information. That evening, Nick called an emergency board meeting. Whitfield is planning a hostile move against us, using information supplied by my ex-fiancée and her partner. The board members exchanged nervous glances. What's your strategy? Asked Patricia Montague, the longest-serving board member. Nick smiled. Let them come. In fact, let's make it easier for them. He outlined his plan, a deliberate vulnerability in their upcoming product launch, a calculated risk that would tempt Whitfield into overextending himself. As the meeting concluded, Nick's phone buzzed with a message from Curtis Dawson. Hayward's getting desperate. Met with known felons today. Planning something illegal. Need to meet. Nick frowned. Leo, turning to crime, complicated matters. It added unpredictability to an otherwise controlled situation. The next day brought another complication. Olivia Palmer, Vanessa's estranged younger sister, requested a meeting. They met at a quiet cafe in Greenwich Village. Olivia, 25, shared her sister's dark hair, but none of her calculating coldness. I'm not here to defend Vanessa, she said immediately. What she did was inexcusable. Then why are you here? Nick asked warily. Olivia pushed a flash drive across the table. Because she's planning something dangerous. These are copies of emails between her and Leo. They're desperate, Nick. They need money badly, and they blame you for everything. Nick pocketed the drive. Why are you helping me? Olivia's smile was sad. Vanessa has been manipulating and using people her entire life, including me. Someone needs to stop her before she destroys more lives. The flash drive contained detailed plans for breaking into Nick's Hamptons estate, information about his daily routines, and discussions about making him pay permanently. Nick immediately increased security at all properties and changed his routines. But he didn't alert the police. Not yet. This was an opportunity to catch them in the act, to add actual criminal charges to his revenge. What he didn't anticipate was Leo's deteriorating mental state. Drowning in debt, with Nick holding the loan shark's marker over his head, Leo had begun abusing cocaine and prescription stimulants. His behavior grew erratic, unpredictable. Late one night, Leo bypassed security at Russell Technologies headquarters and set fire to the research and development lab. The sprinkler system contained the damage, but valuable prototypes and research were destroyed. "This crosses a line," Diana argued when Nick still refused to involve law enforcement. "He could have killed someone." "Not yet," Nick insisted. "I want them cornered like rats before I spring the trap." The next day, Harold Russell died peacefully in his sleep. Nick's grief was genuine, overwhelming. At the funeral, he stood stoic and alone, accepting condolences from the business elite of New York. He didn't notice the figure watching from a distance, didn't see Leo Hayward studying the security arrangements, calculating vulnerabilities. That night, as Nick sat in Harold's study reviewing his grandfather's personal effects, the alarm system detected an intruder. Security cameras showed Leo breaking into the wine cellar, the one area not covered by motion sensors. "Should we apprehend him, sir?" the security chief asked over the phone. "No," Nick decided. "Let him think he's succeeded. I want to see what he's after." Leo emerged an hour later, carrying nothing obvious. Security tracked him to a meeting with Vanessa at a diner in Queens, where they argued intensely before departing in separate directions. The next morning, Nick discovered what had been stolen: Harold's personal journal, containing intimate details of family history, business decisions, and potentially damaging secrets. For the first time, Nick felt a flash of genuine concern. His grandfather's journal contained information that could actually harm the company. Details of past business maneuvers that, taken out of context, could appear unethical or even illegal. Meanwhile, Vanessa had secured a position at Whitfield Enterprises through a carefully constructed fake resume. She was now positioned as an executive assistant to Maxwell Whitfield himself, with access to sensitive communications. The war had escalated beyond public humiliation. Now it threatened everything Nick had worked to protect. The headline in the Wall Street Journal hit like a thunderbolt: Russell Technologies founder accused of fraud and posthumous revelations. Excerpts from Harold's journal, selectively edited to appear damning, detailed questionable business practices from the company's early days. The article quoted anonymous sources close to the Russell family, who validated the journal's authenticity. Russell Technologies' stock plummeted. Board members called in a panic, and Maxwell Whitfield issued a public statement expressing concern about the ethical foundations of our industry's pioneers. Nick had anticipated the attack, but its timing, just as he was mourning his grandfather, struck a nerve. He called an emergency press conference. Facing a barrage of reporters, Nick appeared calm and collected. "My grandfather was a complicated man who built an extraordinary company," he began. "The journal excerpts published today were stolen from our family home during a break-in currently under investigation by police." He paused, his expression hardening. "What the thieves and their media accomplices fail to recognize is that my grandfather kept two journals, one personal, one for posterity. They stole the posthumous version, which Harold Russell created specifically to trap corporate spies." A murmur ran through the assembled press. The revelations about fraudulent practices were fabricated by my grandfather as a safeguard against exactly this kind of corporate espionage. "We have documentation proving these events never occurred, which our legal team is releasing to authorities." It was a masterful countermove, one that Nick and Harold had conceived together during the old man's final days. The real journal remained safely locked in the Russell family vault. By evening, Russell Technologies' stock had rebounded. Maxwell Whitfield was facing questions about his company's involvement in the publishing of stolen property. And in Brooklyn, Leo and Vanessa watched their scheme collapse. "He outplayed us again," Leo snarled, pacing Leo's apartment. "We need something bigger, something he can't spin." Vanessa sat eerily still. "I think I know what to do. We need to target what he truly values." "The company?" "No. His reputation, his self-image as the righteous victim." Her smile was chilling. "We need to make him reveal his true nature." Their opportunity came sooner than expected. Russell Technologies' annual charity gala, the first under Nick's leadership, was scheduled for the following weekend. A high-profile event attended by New York's elite, with extensive press coverage. Vanessa still had contacts in the art world who owed her favors. She secured invitations for herself and Leo under assumed names, with subtle disguises that would pass casual inspection. Meanwhile, Nick was implementing the final stage of his own plan. Through Curtis Dawson, he compiled extensive dossiers on both Leo and Vanessa. Every job application they'd falsified, every person they'd conned, every illegal scheme they'd attempted. He'd also been feeding Olivia Palmer carefully selected information, knowing she would inadvertently relay it to Vanessa during their occasional contact. The night of the gala arrived. The Metropolitan Museum's Temple of Dinder provided a dramatic backdrop for the event, which was raising funds for children's medical research, a cause Harold had championed. Nick circulated among guests, playing the role of gracious host while keeping alert for any sign of his enemies. Midway through the evening, he spotted them, Leo in glasses and a neatly trimmed beard, Vanessa with short blonde hair instead of her natural brunette. He pretended not to notice, observing as they separated and worked the room. Leo headed toward the secure area where the charity auction items were displayed, while Vanessa moved toward the stage where Nick would soon deliver his address. Nick adjusted his plan accordingly. He ordered security to allow Leo access to the auction area, but to record his every move. Meanwhile, he approached the stage slightly earlier than scheduled. As he reached the podium, Vanessa made her move. She stumbled dramatically, spilling red wine on a society matron, creating a commotion at the front of the audience. In that moment of distraction, Leo emerged from the auction area and rushed the stage, a stolen artifact, a small ancient Egyptian figurine, concealed in his jacket. Security intercepted him halfway, exactly as Nick had anticipated. The entire room turned to watch the struggle. That man is attempting to steal a priceless artifact, Nick announced into the microphone. And his accomplice, he pointed directly at Vanessa, is Vanessa Palmer, the woman who attempted to defraud my family and is now working with Maxwell Whitfield to undermine Russell Technologies. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as security removed Vanessa's wig, revealing her true identity. What these desperate individuals don't realize, Nick continued, his voice carrying through the stunned silence, is that I've been aware of their every move for weeks. He nodded to Diana Winters, who tapped on her tablet. The large screens flanking the stage lit up with surveillance footage of Leo stealing Harold's journal, Vanessa meeting with Maxwell Whitfield, both of them planning the gala disruption. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick concluded, you're witnessing the last desperate acts of two people who try to steal my inheritance, smear my grandfather's legacy, and now attempt to corrupt a charitable event for sick children. Police officers emerged from the crowd, taking both Leo and Vanessa into custody, not just for the attempted theft, but for the earlier break-ins, corporate espionage, and fraud charges that Nick had been meticulously documenting. As they were led away in handcuffs, Vanessa locked eyes with Nick one last time. This isn't over, she hissed. Nick's smile was cold. Actually, it is. Your borrowed time just ran out. The arrest of Vanessa Palmer and Leonardo Hayward made headlines, but their legal troubles were just beginning. Nick had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive case against them, working with prosecutors to ensure maximum charges. Bail was set at an astronomical figure that neither could hope to meet. They spent their first night in jail separated, Leo in general population at Rikers Island, Vanessa in the women's facility. Nick returned to his penthouse after the gala, exhausted but satisfied. Diana Winters called with an update. Whitfield is publicly denying any connection to them, throwing Vanessa completely under the bus. He claims she misrepresented herself to obtain employment. As expected, Nick replied. Whitfield always protects himself first. What about the evidence of his involvement? Circumstantial at best, Diana admitted. He was careful to maintain deniability. Nick frowned. Maxwell Whitfield escaping consequences didn't sit well with him. The man had been Harold's nemesis for decades and had willingly participated in the attempt to destroy his legacy. There's another approach, Nick said slowly, one that Harold would appreciate for its elegance. The next morning, Nick called Tyler Hopkins, who had recently been promoted to Chief Technology Officer at Russell Technologies. "I need someone to approach Whitfield with a proposition," Nick explained. "Someone he wouldn't connect to us." Tyler understood immediately. A honeypot trap. Make him think he's getting insider information, but feed him something that will cause him to make a catastrophic business decision. "Exactly," Nick confirmed. "And I know just the person to make the approach." That afternoon, Olivia Palmer received a surprising call from Nick Russell, requesting a private meeting. They met at a secluded table in the back of a quiet restaurant. "I need your help," Nick said without preamble, "to finish what your sister started, but with a different ending." Olivia looked skeptical. "Why would I help you further destroy my sister's life?" "Because she's manipulated you your entire life," Nick replied bluntly. "Because she's hurt everyone who ever trusted her. And because what I'm proposing will actually give her a chance at redemption she doesn't deserve." He outlined his plan to trap Maxwell Whitfield. Olivia would approach him claiming to have access to Russell Technologies' upcoming product designs, specifically a breakthrough in quantum computing that would revolutionize the industry. "Why me?" Olivia asked. "Because you look enough like Vanessa to trigger his interest, but different enough that he won't immediately suspect a trap. And because you have a legitimate reason to want revenge against both me and your sister." Olivia considered this. "What's in it for Vanessa and Leo? If Whitfield takes the bait and commits corporate espionage, I'll have leverage. Enough to potentially reduce their sentences in exchange for testimony against him." "So you're offering them a way out?" Olivia sounded incredulous. "After everything they did?" Nick's smile was cold. "A limited way out. They'll still face consequences, just not the maximum possible punishment." What Nick didn't share was his true endgame. While Olivia was distracting Whitfield with false quantum computing plans, Nick would be executing a carefully orchestrated hostile takeover of Whitfield Enterprises, using capital from Harold's personal fortune and leveraging the temporary stock destabilization that would occur when Whitfield pursued the fake technology. Meanwhile, Leo and Vanessa were discovering the harsh realities of incarceration. Leo, with his history of financial crimes, found himself a target for both inmates and guards. Vanessa, isolated in the women's facility, received word that her family had hired an attorney, not to defend her, but to ensure she received no inheritance or support. 3 days into their incarceration, both received unexpected visitors. Curtis Dawson visited Leo, while Diana Winters met with Vanessa. The message was the same: cooperate with the prosecution against Whitfield, testify about his involvement in the corporate espionage scheme, and sentences could be reduced. Refuse, and the full weight of multiple felony charges would ensure they spent a decade or more in prison. "Why would Nick offer us any kind of deal?" Vanessa asked suspiciously. Diana's smile was thin. "Mr. Russell's primary target has always been Whitfield. Your unfortunate involvement with him made you collateral damage." This, of course, was misdirection. Nick wanted them to believe they were being used as pawns against Whitfield, rather than recognizing they were still the primary targets of his revenge. Both agreed to cooperate, seeing it as their only pathway to a reduced sentence. What they didn't realize was that their cooperation was feeding a much larger scheme, one that would ensure they implicated themselves even further while giving Nick everything he needed to destroy Whitfield Enterprises. Olivia Palmer played her role perfectly. Approaching Whitfield at an industry conference, she hinted at access to proprietary Russell Technologies information, something my sister mentioned before everything fell apart. Whitfield, initially cautious, couldn't resist the temptation. He arranged a private meeting where Olivia shared carefully crafted documents detailing a non-existent quantum computing breakthrough. "Russell's planning to announce this next quarter," she explained. "It's going to make current encryption methods obsolete." Whitfield took the bait completely. Within days, he had diverted massive resources toward developing competing quantum technology, making risky acquisitions of specialized firms, and leveraging his company heavily on the promise of beating Russell Technologies to market. Meanwhile, Nick moved pieces strategically around the corporate chessboard. Russell Technologies quietly acquired significant shares in Whitfield's overextended suppliers. They filed patents that would block Whitfield's development path. And most critically, they prepared their actual breakthrough product. Not in quantum computing, but in a completely different sector that Whitfield had neglected while chasing the phantom technology. When Leo and Vanessa provided their sworn testimony about Whitfield's involvement in corporate espionage, they unwittingly confirmed details that perfectly aligned with Nick's narrative. Every statement they made strengthened his position for the coming corporate war. As the plan accelerated, Nick received unexpected news. Maxwell Whitfield was pursuing a merger with Asian technology giant Nakamura Corp., a desperate move to secure funding for his quantum computing pursuit. Nick immediately called Hideo Nakamura, the founder's grandson and current CEO. The two had a cordial relationship built on mutual respect. "Whitfield is trying to sell you technology that doesn't exist," Nick explained bluntly. "He's been misled by false information as part of a complex sting operation that will soon become public." Nakamura, always careful, asked for proof. Nick provided select evidence from Leo and Vanessa's testimony, along with forensic financial analysis showing Whitfield's increasingly desperate financial maneuvers. The merger talks collapsed overnight. Whitfield Enterprises' stock plummeted 30% in a single day, and Nick prepared to deliver the final blow. The hearing for Leo and Vanessa's plea deals was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in federal court. Both expected reduced sentences in exchange for their cooperation against Maxwell Whitfield. Both were about to be severely disappointed. Nick sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as they were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits, handcuffed and looking considerably less polished than during their scheming days. The prosecutor, Jennifer Reyes, stood to address the judge. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the government is withdrawing the previously discussed plea arrangements." Both defendants looked stunned. Their attorneys immediately objected. "New evidence has emerged," Reyes continued, demonstrating that the defendants perjured themselves in their testimony against Maxwell Whitfield. The conspiracy they described was, in fact, orchestrated entirely by themselves, with no participation from Mr. Whitfield. The judge frowned. "What evidence?" Reyes presented a flash drive. Recordings of the defendants discussing their plan to frame Mr. Whitfield, secretly recorded by Ms. Palmer's sister, Olivia, who was working with authorities. It was a masterful reversal. Nick had never intended to reduce their sentences. That promise was merely to extract testimony that, when proven false, would compound their charges with perjury and obstruction of justice. Olivia Palmer hadn't been recording for the authorities. She'd been recording for Nick. And she'd captured exactly what he needed to ensure maximum sentences for both Vanessa and Leo. As the implications became clear, Vanessa turned in her seat, scanning the courtroom until she spotted Nick. The look of pure hatred on her face was met with a slight, satisfied smile. The judge denied bail reconsideration. Both were returned to jail to await trial on expanded charges. Their attorneys, sensing disaster, began pressuring them to accept whatever plea the prosecution might still offer. Outside the courthouse, Nick met briefly with Olivia. "You never intended to help them at all," she observed, not sounding particularly upset by this revelation. "They never intended to honor any agreement," Nick countered. "This way, justice is actually served." Olivia nodded slowly. "What happens to Whitfield now?" Nick's expression hardened. "He faces his own reckoning." That same afternoon, Nick called an extraordinary meeting of Russell Technologies' board. He presented a bold proposition, a hostile takeover bid for the now vulnerable Whitfield Enterprises. "Whitfield stock has crashed 40% in the past week," Nick explained. "Their credit rating has been downgraded. Their Asian partnerships have collapsed. This is the opportunity my grandfather waited decades for." The board was hesitant. "It's risky," Patricia Montague pointed out. "Even weakened, Whitfield Enterprises is a major acquisition." "I'm not asking the company to take the risk alone," Nick replied. "I'm personally financing 30% of the acquisition from my inheritance. This isn't just business. It's fulfilling my grandfather's last wish." The vote was unanimous. The takeover bid was announced that evening. Maxwell Whitfield, blindsided and desperate, called Nick directly. You orchestrated this entire thing, he accused, his voice shaking with rage. Those two cons, the quantum computing lie, all of it. I learned from watching you target my grandfather for decades, Nick replied calmly. The difference is, I succeeded where you always failed. I'll fight this takeover with everything I have, Whitfield threatened. You're welcome to try, Nick said before hanging up. The corporate battle was brutal but brief. Whitfield, overextended and abandoned by allies, couldn't match Russell Technologies' resources. Within 3 weeks, the takeover was complete. Whitfield Enterprises ceased to exist as an independent entity. Maxwell Whitfield himself was forced into early retirement, his reputation in tatters after evidence emerged of multiple ethical violations discovered during the acquisition's due diligence process. Meanwhile, Leo Hayward's trial proceeded quickly. Without resources for an adequate defense, he accepted a plea bargain, 12 years for fraud, corporate espionage, breaking and entering, and attempted theft. Vanessa, more defiant, insisted on going to trial. It was a catastrophic decision. The evidence against her was overwhelming, supplemented by Olivia's devastating testimony about her sister's long history of manipulation and deception. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge, citing her lack of remorse and the calculated nature of her crimes, sentenced her to 18 years. As she was led from the courtroom, Vanessa locked eyes with Nick one final time. I still have secrets that could hurt you, she mouthed silently. Nick merely raised an eyebrow, unconcerned. He had long since neutralized any leverage she might have imagined she possessed. That evening, Nick visited his grandfather's grave, placing a single white rose on the headstone. It's done, he said quietly. The company is secure. Whitfield is finished. And the people who try to steal your legacy will spend their best years in prison. As he walked back to his car, he received a text from Curtis Dawson. Final loose and tied up. The loan sharks who were after Hayward have been paid off with the provision they never contact him again, even after his release. He'll never know you were behind it. Nick smiled. This last act wasn't mercy, it was the ultimate power move. Leo would spend his incarceration wondering when the debt collectors would come for him, living in constant fear of a threat that Nick had quietly neutralized. It was the perfect final touch to his revenge, leaving his enemies alive to contemplate their failures and live with the consequences of challenging a Russell. 1 year later, Nick Russell stood at the podium in Russell Technologies' newly renovated headquarters, formerly Whitfield Enterprises' flagship building, now transformed with a Russell logo prominently displayed on its facade. Today we launch not just a new product line, he told the assembled press and industry leaders, but a new era for technology that honors my grandfather's vision while pushing boldly into the future. The company had emerged stronger from the tumultuous events of the past year. The acquisition of Whitfield Enterprises had been smoothly integrated, redundancies eliminated, and profitable divisions expanded. Nick himself had changed as well. The betrayal and subsequent revenge had hardened him in some ways, made him more cautious with his trust, more decisive in business. Yet the experience had also given him perspective on what truly mattered. After the presentation, Diana Winters approached him. Quarterly prison reports arrived, she said quietly, handing him a folder. Thought you might want to see them. Nick skimmed the contents. Leo Hayward had been transferred to a medium security facility after being assaulted repeatedly in maximum security. He was working in the prison library, keeping his head down, already looking toward potential early release for good behavior. Vanessa's adjustment had been rockier. Multiple disciplinary infractions for fighting and contraband had extended her sentence by 8 months already. She had alienated other inmates with the same manipulative behavior that had characterized her life outside. They're no longer a threat, Diana observed. Nick closed the folder. They never really were. Just opportunists who picked the wrong target. Later that evening, Nick hosted a small dinner party at his renovated Hamptons estate. The guest list was selective. Tyler Hopkins and his wife, Diana Winters, Curtis Dawson, and, surprisingly, Olivia Palmer. Over the past year, Olivia had become something of a friend. Initially connected by their mutual experience with Vanessa's manipulation, they had discovered shared interests in art and philanthropy. Nick had helped her establish a small gallery in Soho, focusing on emerging artists, a genuine venture unlike her sister's facade. As the dinner concluded, Tyler raised his glass. To Harold Russell, the man who taught you how to win. Nick smiled, but shook his head slightly. Harold taught me more than winning. He taught me that true power isn't about destroying enemies. It's about building something they can't tear down. After the guests departed, Nick walked alone along the beach behind the estate. The revenge that had consumed him for months was complete, total. Vanessa and Leo would spend their prime years incarcerated. Whitfield was ruined, his company absorbed into the Russell empire. Every person who had betrayed or threatened him had been methodically destroyed. Yet the victory felt different than he had imagined during those dark days following the discovery of Vanessa's betrayal. It wasn't the destruction of his enemies that brought satisfaction. It was the knowledge that he had protected what mattered: his grandfather's legacy, the company they had built, the future they had envisioned. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hear congratulations are in order. Impressive how you handled the Whitfield acquisition. You've become your grandfather's true heir in every sense. When you're ready for a new challenge, call me. MT." Nick smiled, recognizing Meredith Torres' initials. The woman who had helped him trap Leo by playing the vengeful ex had gone on to become a successful venture capitalist. Their paths would cross again, he was certain. As he watched the waves crash against the shore, Nick reflected on the long journey from betrayal to victory. The wedding that never happened had been a blessing in disguise, revealing Vanessa's true nature before legal ties could be established, exposing vulnerabilities in his business security, and ultimately pushing him to become the leader his grandfather had always believed he could be. A shooting star streaked across the night sky. Nick thought of his parents, of Harold, of all that had been lost and gained. The inheritance Vanessa and Leo had coveted wasn't really about money or power. It was about legacy, about building something that outlasted a single lifetime. That was the inheritance he would protect and expand. And anyone who threatened it would learn, as his enemies had, that Nicholas Russell never forgot a betrayal and never left a debt unpaid. His revenge wasn't just complete, it was perfect. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.